Welcome. I'm Jeremy Druin, manager of the library's Missouri Valley Special Collections. Thank you for joining us for another online installment of our Signature Sunday series. We must truthfully confront our history of racial injustice before we can repair its painful legacy. That quote is featured prominently on the website of the Equal Justice Initiative, an organization whose mission is to end mass incarceration and confront our nation's history of racial injustice and violence. Working towards that goal, EJI launched the Community Remembrance Project, an initiative to memorialize victims of lynching by collecting soil samples and erecting historical markers to honor those whose lives were tragically stolen. Our speaker this afternoon, Dr. Carmaletta Williams, Chief Executive Officer of the Black Archives of Mid-America, has helped lead efforts to memorialize lynching victims in Missouri, including Levi Harrington, a Black Kansas Citian murdered by a white mob in 1882. Dr. Karma, as many of you know her, was born and raised in Kansas City. She received a master's degree in English from UMKC and her PhD from the University of Kansas. She is a retired professor of English and African American Studies at Johnson County Community College. During her more than 3-decade academic career, she traveled the world, teaching in France, China, West Africa, and the Netherlands. Dr. Karma is also a writer, publisher, and editor, authoring books and articles on poet Langston Hughes and author Zora Neale Hurston. Since taking over as director of the Black Archives in 2018, she's hosted numerous community events and forums, curated exhibitions, conducted oral histories, and led numerous other Black history projects. One that she's especially passionate about is the Community Remembrance Project. We're thrilled to have her with us today to talk about it. Dr. Karma, welcome.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm honored to be here. As you know, I'm very impressed and honored to be a part of programs with Kansas City Public Library. Your commitment to the community is amazing and deserves to be respected and talked about. But I'm here to talk about the Community Remembrance Project now. When I took over changing an administration at the Black Archives, one of the first things I heard about was the Community Remembrance Project. We are the first site outside of Alabama to have an actual exhibition for people who were victims of racial murder. There was already a group working here. There was a Kansas City group, a Missouri group, CRP Missouri, and now there is a lot of work going on in St. Louis with that organization. And what we want to do and why this was so important for the Black Archives to take on is that this is an intrinsic part of our history. And we cannot ignore it. We cannot act like it didn't happen. We cannot hope that those stories go away because they won't. So what we have to do then is to honor those people who were victims. We know the EJI, the Equal Justice Initiative, has identified 60 people who were victims of racial murder in Missouri from Reconstruction to 1964. We know there are more. So we built the exhibition for 80. There are some people that we'll never know, and more people are being discovered. The St. Louis group, as a matter of fact, has identified other victims in their area. So we have to honor them. And this is not a place of sadness. It is not a place of horror. It's not like you're visiting, even though people tell me the building's haunted, the building's not haunted. But those ghosts of our past are alive and well, and they're calling for us to acknowledge who they are. So that's what we try to do at the Black Archives. We've been very fortunate to be part of the Greater Kansas City CRP Community Remembrance Project group. We actually house that exhibit for the CRP. It's not actually ours in that it just belongs to the Black Archives. It belongs to our community. And that group has been instrumental in making sure that we identify who the victims were, that we attend ceremonies where we want the communities to acknowledge what happened. As an example, in Springfield, Missouri, they held a Community Remembrance Project for 3 men who were lynched there, 2 one day, and it got so good to them that they went and got another man out of jail the next day. But what's significant about that is that Springfield and Greene County said, okay, we know this happens. There's nothing we can do about those murders, but what we can do is address the travesty and honor those people. So we have a little video that I want you to see that'll show you what the exhibit looks like and the names there, and then we'll talk about it when we get back. This space is the Community Lynching Project exhibition. And we have partnered with the Equal Justice Initiative in Alabama, and we're the only site outside of Alabama that has this exhibition. And what we do is try to promote community healing. So we find the places where people were victims of racial murder, and we know that hanging, lynching, was only one form. Most people were lynched by dragging behind horses, behind trucks, behind cars. We know the story of Richard Byrd, who was dragged behind a truck until all of his body parts fell off. So those things were common. And what this exhibit does is it pays honor to those people that we know are innocent of these crimes. So they've identified, Equal Justice Initiative has identified these 60 people who were lynched in Missouri between Reconstruction and 1964. We know their names, we know where they were murdered, and we know the dates. We know these people's biographies. In the Heritage Hall, you saw the video about Erastus Brown, the 20-year-old who was murdered, the father of 2 children. He's falsely accused of hitting a woman in the head, a white woman in the head with a rock. Took them 2 days to break into the jail to take him out, but they got him out. They paraded him through town. This was not something that was done under cloak and dagger. These were open events. People would advertise in the newspapers. Railroads would offer discount fares. Hotels would offer discounts. People would dress up and bring picnic baskets, dress up in their Sunday best, and whole families would come out. So as my friend Lawrence Rogers, who retired from K-State, has named these grotesque carnivals, because it doesn't take long to murder somebody by hanging them till the neck till dead. They would play carnival games. And if you won the game, then you got to cut a piece off the body. And people would cut pieces off, put them in jars, put them in their storefront windows, along the streets, in their front windows. But I think one of the most horrific things, 2 horrific things, one, not just men were lynched, women and children were also murdered. But also whole families came to these events. Whole families, and they would dress up in their Sunday best, and they'd bring picnic baskets. And so they would laugh, and they'd play games, and they'd have fun, and if you won the game, you got to cut something off so you had something to take home. But for me, what's most horrific about that is, see, I'm a little kid, I'm 4 years old, and I'm here with my family at one of these grotesque carnivals. My father puts me on his shoulders so that I can see what's going on, so I get a clear view of these bodies. My daddy's laughing and happy, my mother's laughing and happy, my grandparents, all of my relatives and neighbors and friends, they're all having great times, they're playing games, and if they win, they're celebrating. Then as that 4-year-old, I don't learn how horrific this is. I just don't know. So that's why January 6th can happen, because those are the children of these folks who didn't learn how horrific this is. So we put an ad out that we wanted someone to do a mural for this exhibit, and several artists came with their portfolios, and one named Charlie came in, and I looked at his paintings, and I'm like, Charlie, you're 20 years old. Why do you have paintings of lynchings? So we talked about the intergenerational effect. It's not just old folks like me, but young people like Charlie. He's 20 years old, and his art reflects this kind of madness. So we talked about the grotesque carnivals and that men, women, and children were murdered, that people were having fun and playing games. We had a group of middle schoolers here one time. A little boy jumped from there to there. And I said, are you okay, honey? He said, I just saw the Ku Klux Klan. I said, guess what, sweetie? Not all of them wore hoods and robes, but that mentality permeated these gatherings. In Springfield, which is having their own Community Remembrance Project, on April 14th, 1906, these two men were lynched. 7,000 people were in the square, and not one person said, don't do it. That's not right. Don't do it. Got so good to him, the next day they went and got another, and they lynched him. What's great about this is that Springfield is not going to let that rotted sore keep festering. You know, you have to take the scab off of it and treat it, antiseptic on it, so that you can heal, so that your community can heal. And their community can start to heal now. And other Union, Missouri gathered this soil from under where Erastus Brown was hanged. And what you do is identify as closely as possible where the body hung, and then dig some soil out from under that spot. Put it in the jar so that we can honor them here. We have some counties that are saying, no, that's in our past. We just want to let it go. Well, we feel like you can't let it go. But that's their choice. And if that's what they see for their community, then we'll just go in and get the dirt with, as Zora Neale Hurston says, without fanfare or farewell. You know, we will just get this, because we cannot let these victims go unannounced, unacknowledged. But we also know that there are many people that we won't know who they were. You know, we all know the Emmett Till story, right? They go into his uncle's house, drag that boy out, murder and torture him, and kill him before they actually put the sawmill weight around his legs and throw him into the river. That happened multiple times. There's nothing the family can do to stop that. So what happens is that after the murder happens, then they go down and they cut the body down, they fix the body for burial, and they have ceremonies. Those people, we don't know them, but we want to honor them still in this exhibit. So my plan is to just have empty jars for these people. There are some people where we found the body, not we, but the body was found, but we don't know who it belonged to. And we have 2 of these in the exhibit, but there are many more where we'll never know. So we do have honor for those. Levi Harrington was lynched off the West Bluff in Kansas City, Missouri. There was a ceremony dedicating this monument to him, and the day that George Floyd was murdered, the police had video of white men driving up in a truck and cutting this down off a steel beam, off a steel post. So it wasn't like he just drove past and got upset, because if you're going to cut it off a steel beam, you need tools. So they cut it off and pushed it over the hill, threw it over the hill. So the city retrieved it and had it in storage, and then we decided that it belonged here at the Black Archives. So they cleaned it up, which I appreciate. I would rather it have stayed as rugged as when they retrieved it. But it's here. But we're not going to let this stop us. Each and every make their own, and we will install it, and we will protect it better. Because those kinds of people cannot stop us from healing. They cannot stop our progress. And that's what this exhibit is about. Do you have questions, comments?
Where was this originally?
It's on the West Bluff, right off of 12th Street, over where Folger, where the plant is, just as you go down to the West Bottoms, it's right on that hill. And at this, when he was murdered, there were thousands of people on the hill watching that happen. Now, how can people of good conscience, of good faith, watch it, for one thing, and how can they not stop it for another?
Is the goal to have all of these spaces with jars, and how long do you think that will take?
That is the goal, and I hope that it happens quickly. But we may have to, as I said, just go collect some ourselves. But we want the communities to do it because it's a way for the community to heal. And this is the Community Remembrance Project, so that the community can remember and heal from it.
Acknowledge that this horrific, this horrific history has happened, so that we don't want to continue this.
Right. So that we can understand now the remnants of what happened. Why are we seeing these kinds of things happen now in our society? Well, because they're holdovers. Yeah, very much. They're just holdovers from these times. And we have to fix that. And we can fix it, but we have to acknowledge it. Well, thank you for coming to the Black Archives of Mid-America in Kansas City.
Thank you for having us.
We're in the historic 18th and Vine Jazz District. We're at 1722 East 17th Terrace, 17th Terrace and Highland. Free parking. We have a coffee shop and a gift shop, and we also honor the women's professional basketball, started here in Kansas City. We have a museum dedicated to them, and Solomon and others work in the recording studio upstairs because our mission is to capture, share, exhibit, and educate people about the history of people of African descent in this country. So thank you for being a part of that.
Dr. Carmaletta, it's a powerful video. The first thing that comes to me is, before we viewed the video, you said, we're not coming from this from a place of sadness and horror, but watching that video, learning the story of Levi Harrington and others, that's my first thought is a sad period of our history, and it's horrific. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I'm sure when you get people who come to the museum or you're talking about the Community Remembrance Project, they have the same sense of sadness and horror. What do you say to kind of get them beyond that to start the healing process and as a learning tool for moving forward in the future?
One of the things that we have to acknowledge is there's nothing we can do about it. It's done. Those people, men, women, and children, were murdered. They're dead. And their lives, their histories, and those actions have been buried, in a sense, since it happened. So what we have to do is honor them. We have to bring it up. And as we celebrate who they were and the atrocities that happened to them, then we have to understand that what we are doing is something that's very good. It's something that's very honorable, and it's a counter to those horrible times, those horrific actions, and those people who had no conscience or had no feelings for those persons that they were marrying. Erastus Brown was 20 years old with 2 kids. He was on his way to the drugstore to get some medicine for his child who was sick. After they murdered him, his wife knows that she has to go tell his father. So she takes the 2 kids, and the baby dies in her arms on the train on the way to tell his father. That breaks my heart. That makes me extremely sad. But what would make me even more so is if nobody knew Erastus Brown's story, if he just died and fell into anonymity. So that's the slant that I tried to take to this exhibit. Even though the actions were horrific, honoring these people is something that's very positive, something that's very good, and something that's very necessary. We have to do it if we're going to heal. Otherwise, we just still have those festering racial sores and we have to do something about it.
Dr. Karma, can you talk a little bit about the Levi Harrington story for our people watching today that might not be familiar, that maybe have not seen the exhibit yet? Just a little bit about his background and the story, his story of his murder.
Levi Harrington was falsely accused of taking something off a wagon down in the West Bottoms. He was paraded through town. He was hung from a tree in the West Bottoms, right overlooking the river, down by where the old Folgers plant is. And literally thousands of people, which is the part that I have trouble dealing with, watched it happen. If you stand where the monument is, where the memorial is, and look up towards downtown, that whole hill was just blanketed with people watching this man being murdered. And the fact that there's so many people there and no one says, don't do it, you know, that cuts, and it cuts deeply. So we have to do something. We have to acknowledge him. And I think what makes this even worse for Levi Harrington is that we installed a monument for him on that place, and they cut it down. The same people that had the same mentality as those folks who stood on the bluff and watched him die are the same mental state as those folks who cut his memorial down and threw it over the hill. We have another, and we're going to better protect it, because we can't let those kinds of people, that kind of mentality, stop us from honoring innocent victims. Remember, every person in this exhibit, we know they're innocent. So it's not like either, oh, well, they might have, they did not. And they were innocent victims, and we have to acknowledge that so that we can move forward.
Dr. Carmen, can you speak to that a little bit? You know, I'm a researcher, so I always appreciate the research process. I assume that it usually starts with newspaper news reports of the period, and how do they determine innocence, or how, you know, what resources do they being I guess just the members of the Community Remembrance Project, what's the research process in tracking information about these unjust killings?
Yeah, there are a team of people in Montgomery, Alabama at the Equal Justice Initiative who are doing this research. But it's amazing what's printed in the newspapers. When I was actually a long time ago doing research for my dissertation, my great-grandfather, who was suffering from diabetes and sometimes would be irrational, would say, they killed her. They killed my beautiful Blanche. And my grandmother's name was Blanche, so I knew that she wasn't dead, and it was like, Papa's gone crazy. But in researching why he was saying that, and finally they told me that that was his sister. She had been raped by the pharmacist in the town, and Papa found out about it and killed him, and got on the train and hoboed and ended up here in Kansas. But the newspaper recorded that incident. And there seems to be no shame in talking about people racially in derogatory means and by accusing them of things. And many times it'll even say, you know, that they found out differently. And they don't care. We have the story, Erastus Brown, it's in the newspapers that they went twice to try to get him out of the jail, try to break him out of the jail. The first time, the sheriff stopped them. And the second time, they came back 2 days later and took him out. Those stories are documented. They're there, they're real, and I'm amazed and chagrined and all kinds of things of what actually shows up in the newspapers, how there seems to be no remorse, no embarrassment to write these stories. The ads for the train discounts are in the newspapers. You know, we're going to hang, you know, so-and-so, a black man, a Negro actually, that's what they say, for whatever it is. And the stories say, and we have evidence that, like Erastus Brown, he was on his way to the pharmacy. He wasn't even in the area where the woman was hit in the head. So the research is, you know, I'm a repository rat too. You know, research is a good thing. Look it up. Look it up. You'll find the evidence. And when people call almost daily to the archives to tell us stories about their family history, then I tell them, okay, what do you have written? What documents do you have? What have you found? And we literally have thousands and thousands of documents about Black Kansas City, but there are also documents about racial injustice, about all kinds of disequities, and I'm saying dis on purpose instead of inequities. So those stories are captured somewhere, and we have to continue to dig them out, and then we have to do something about it when we find them.
And just so I'm clear, the 60 lynchings identified in Missouri, those are all documented, right? All for this project, these are all researched and documented incidences of innocent men, women, children being murdered.
Right. The Equal Justice Initiative had actually done that work before we started our Community Remembrance Project in Missouri. So they have that, and they're continuing to do research. And the CRP in St. Louis, they have discovered other instances of racial murders in that area. And remember that, as I said in the video, not everybody who was lynched was hanged by the neck. Dragging was the most prevalent form of lynching. And there are those stories. And there seems to be some kind of pride in having done it. So those stories are there. And there's always the excuse. It's always someone was accused of, never found guilty of. But then there's the other side of the story where we know they didn't do it.
Dr. Carmel, we have an audience question that just came in related to research and projects. They asked, as you progressed through this project, was there a story that you hadn't heard that made you think, you know, why isn't this common knowledge?
You know, two things really struck me as we got the names. You know, EJI sent us the names of these 60 people, and we put them in the exhibit. There was a Warner, and you saw his jar being installed in the exhibit. My maiden name was Warner. My father's family name is Warner. And it just hit me to my bones. It's like, and he was from St. Joe. Not that I know that we have a St. Joseph connection. Actually, I know my Warner relatives were from St. Louis. But the idea and the notion, knowing that he very well could have been a relative, you know, and what happened to him? They drug him out of his home. You know, it's like Emmett Till, and people were helpless to stop it. And the other one is there's a Waters. My mother's family name was Waters. So the connection then between who we are today and what our lives are like and where we came from and our histories, it's too close. It's too finely intertwined, and we have to know these stories. We have to find out the truth.
We have another audience question that points to, I think, next steps. They say, I think that some of the resistance we face is because people don't understand where we want to go. Is this really just a matter of acknowledging and understanding and healing? What work is to be done to reach the point, to reach the end goal?
Sometimes I think it is that they just don't get it. They don't understand what we're trying to do. There's also this sense of hiding history. And the old saying, let bygones be bygones. They won't be bygones. They won't stay gone. We can't say, okay, that happened in our past. We're not going to acknowledge it. Just let it go. Why are you fixating on this? Let it go. Let's move on. Well, you can't move forward until you've made that road, until you've steadied that path. And that's what we're doing here. We're not accusing people. I remember I taught African American studies for 28 years, and I remember a young woman saying that she disagreed with everything I said. And I'm like, everything, even my name? She said, my parents, we're not privileged. My parents worked hard for everything they got. I worked hard for everything that I got. I never even thought about race until I was 26 years old. And I thanked her for proving my point, because you will not find a person of color, any color, who will tell you that they had the privilege not to think about race until they were 26. So if you're in one of those communities that say, well, we're just going to just let it go, get it behind us, and there were 7,000 people watching that murder of a person who was chosen to be a victim purely because of his race, then you're not moving forward. You're not addressing it. You're not healing. You're not making strong strides towards something positive for your community. You're just letting it fester. We're not accusing you, like my student. I wasn't accusing her of being a slave owner, but we know that people, black and white, own slaves. We have to confront that. We have to address that. They own people. Same thing with these murders. These people were murdered and got away with it. Nobody was prosecuted for these murders, and they did it in broad open daylight. And why is that? Because the victims were Black.
I agree. These can be uncomfortable topics, but they have to be discussed. There's got to be dialogue, and I think with groups like the Equal Justice Initiative to help lead some of that dialogue in our communities. I'm curious. I want to talk about the exhibit. It's at the Black Archives. The Stories in the Soil. So you were obviously giving a tour in the video. I'm sure you've seen hundreds of people go through there. I'm curious, are there different reactions from, say, young and old visitors or Black and white visitors who come through? Are there different reactions to what they're seeing?
There are, and that tour, as a matter of fact, was not staged. I was actually, Solomon, our videographer, and I were actually going to do something about Lucy's cabin. I was not going to be on camera. And then a couple of the people in their groups started asking questions, and Saul was like filming it. But yeah, it's all different, and what amazes me is when the young people come, their reaction is quite different from older people. For older folks, it's like this has been their reality for so long. They've known about this for so long, and then they've either accepted it or denied it or moved on or talked about it, but nobody's done anything about it. So then they are happy to see that there's work being done by this organization to actually honor those folks. With young kids, their lives now, as sad as it is tied up in violence. And so they understand racial violence a lot more than I would like for them to. I would like for them not to know that. I would like not to have to say that marker was cut down the same day of George Floyd's murder. I'd like to say that, but I can't, because this continues in our society. We can try as hard as we want to have revisionist history and say, this happened, that didn't happen, that didn't happen, that didn't happen. But if it did, then it's part of our history. It's there and it's in the fabric of our lives. And because it happened 50 years ago, and that's where our exhibit ends, and from there to the present, there's supposed to be a continuation of the exhibit at Bruce R. Watkins Center, and I hope that gets done. But it continues. And it's going to continue unless we say, this is what happened, and it's not right, and what can we do about it? And I want our young folk especially to know that their lives are significant. Erastus Brown was 20 years old. His life was significant. So, all of these other people, most of them were young folk, 20, 18, in their young, early 20s. Their lives meant something. So we can't just say they didn't exist and oh, that's too bad. We're sorry that happened. Let's move on. You can't do that. And that's what the exhibit is about. And that's what this work is about. We're creating study guides so that we can have some turnkey lessons so that when school groups come, the teachers don't have to know all of this. We'll put it there for you. All you have to do is read the guide. We'll even have test questions in there for you. But, this is what it is. This is what you can say, but you have to be honest. And so, that's the point.
Dr. Carmen, we had a couple more audience questions come in. I'd like to read those. Is the Harrington marker, is that live permanently in the Black Archives? Is there plans to put another one on the West Bluff Bridge?
The original one is in the Black Archives. And then EJI, Equal Justice Initiative, did another one. They made another one, and that's back on the West Bluff.
Oh, great. Have other cities had problems with vandalism of those markers? Or?
Yeah, and that's sad. And so we have to find a better way to protect them. Those same people who were holding their kids on their shoulders to look at these burnt, cut up bodies are the same folks, are those families, or those people who are now vandalizing the markers. So we have to protect them. We have to figure out how to do that, because we're not going to let them win. We're not going to let them keep destroying these monuments.
As a community, we should be outraged at those acts, and we should continue to show that outrage and expose people that are trying to destroy those markers.
That's my feeling. If you have a video of that, you saw the truck, you saw the people, why aren't there arrests? People should go to jail for that. So we'll see. We have to get the communities to be committed to the sanctity of these markers.
Someone asked about people involved in the project that assisted you. Someone mentioned Alvin Sykes in particular. Was he involved at all with that project? We unfortunately lost Alvin not too long ago. Great civil rights leader, friend of the library, friend of Kansas City. Was he involved at all in the project?
Alvin Sykes is an amazing man. And when you look at his background and what he accomplished, it's phenomenal. It is phenomenal. And I am honored that the UMKC Foundation is making me the inaugural recipient of the Alvin Sykes Justice Award. It just tears my heart up. I live next door to Steve Harvey, and that was his first social justice case. He should be honored. He should always be revered for his work in civil rights. In fact, he was on his way to see Mamie Till when he had his accident. He was not involved in this project, but he would have. This is the kind of activity and social justice work that I'm sure that he would have participated in wholeheartedly. But, he was doing some national, amazing civil rights work, and he was an amazing person.
Without a doubt, he would have helped with this project, helped spearhead this project. And we have another audience question. You had mentioned that there's been some pushback from other Missouri communities to, erect these historical markers and acknowledge that kind of uncomfortable part of their history. Did you encounter any pushback locally here in Kansas City?
Now, we have a really amazing Kansas City group of people. And they have worked so hard. They were at it long before I got involved in getting the city and getting the area involved in making sure that these Levi Harrington in particular was acknowledged. And we didn't have that kind of pushback, but there are some communities that say we just want to let it go. So we're not going to let it go. We'll still collect jars of soil. They won't have a community remembrance program, which is too bad, but we'll get the soil and we'll get it into the exhibit.
If there are individuals in the community that want to be a part of the Community Remembrance Project, what would be your recommendation, Dr. Carmaletta, if for individuals who want to be more involved in this project?
Oh, we would love to have you. Probably the best point of contact would be Elise Max, M-A-X, at Missourians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And she has been doing a yeoman's job in keeping this committee going and getting the work done, and she can get people signed up. And I'm not in my office, so I don't have her email in front of me, but Missourians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, Elise Max, and she'd be a great contact.
And finally, where can for Kansas Cityans, people outside the area who haven't seen the stories in the soil exhibit, where do they need to go? What are the hours? And yeah, you want to just
that's my favorite part. I get to talk about the Black Archives of Mid-America in Kansas City. We're at 1722 East 17th Terrace in Kansas City, Missouri, 64108. We're in the historic 18th and Vine Jazz District. Our building is actually on 17th and Highland. It's a beautiful big building. We have a sign out, a couple of signs actually, but we're getting a bigger sign there. If we share a parking lot with the Urban Youth Academy, so you can either come in on 17th Terrace in Paseo or come across 18th Street and come down Highland or Vine, and our building is there. We're open Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, and Saturdays by appointments, which means we're open a lot of Saturdays. So please come. Our phone number is 816-221-1600. And if you have a group, please call for an appointment. Love to see you at the Black Archives. We also have a coffee shop and a gift shop, and we have Heritage Hall where we show the Erastus Brown video. So you can see that at the Black Archives.
Like I mentioned in my intro, Dr. Carmer, you've done some great things with the Black Archives in just a few short years. I definitely encourage people to visit the exhibits, look at the archival material, have some coffee. You can spend a day there for sure. And Dr. Carmer, thank you. I know you have a lot of interview requests and just so thankful that you agreed to be here today and to talk about the Community Remembrance Project. And hopefully you'll come back sometime soon, and we'll talk to you again.
Always, always, Jeremy. And thank you. And as I said before, I really am honored to be a partner with Kansas City Public Library on all of the events that we do together. The Black History book wasn't a calendar last year that won awards. That was a treat. And we're doing the Black History Month calendar for this year. So I appreciate the commitment and involvement of the public library, and I appreciate you including Black Archives. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And I'll do a final plug. Go to kcblackhistory.org, a new website that the library and the Black Archives and Local Investment Commission created a new website with great content and lesson plans and biographies and essays, kcblackhistory.org. And I'd like to thank our audience today for taking time on a Sunday afternoon to join us. Thank you.
Thank you.